The moment she said my name, I knew my life was about to split into a before and an after. We were sitting at a long table in an expensive restaurant I couldn't pronounce properly, surrounded by people who wore success like it was stitched into their suits. Crystal glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly. The air smelled like wine, roasted meat, and accomplishment, none of which belonged to me. I had borrowed my blazer from a friend. The sleeves were a little short, but I told myself no one would notice. She stood up to speak. I watched her from my seat, my chest filling with the familiar mix of pride and exhaustion. Pride because she had made it. Exhaustion because I knew exactly how much it had cost. Not just her, but me. She smiled, radiant, confident, already halfway gone. I just want to thank everyone who supported me through medical school, she said, her voice smooth, practiced. This journey wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Applause rolled through the room. I clapped too, slower than everyone else, my palms stinging. I waited for my name. I waited for a glance. I waited for anything that would confirm that I still mattered in this version of her life. Then she said it. There's someone special I need to acknowledge, she continued, eyes scanning the table, not landing on me. Someone who's been an incredible mentor and partner. She turned slightly. To Dr. Raghav Malhotra. My hands stopped mid-clap. A man at the other end of the table stood, smiling like he'd been expecting this. Tailored suit. Confident posture. A watch that probably cost more than my yearly rent. He nodded graciously as people applauded again, louder this time. And, she added, almost as an afterthought, I think it's important to be honest. Tonight also marks a new chapter in my personal life. That's when she finally looked at me. We've decided to go our separate ways. Just like that. No warning. No conversation. No mercy. The room went quiet for a second, then filled with murmurs that felt like insects crawling under my skin. I sat there, frozen, every instinct screaming at me to stand up, to say something, to remind her, and everyone else, who I was to her. But nothing came out. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know who I was without her. She sat back down like she hadn't just erased years of my life with a sentence. People avoided my eyes. A few offered awkward smiles. Someone patted my shoulder, a gesture so empty it almost hurt more than the breakup itself. I felt small. Reduced. Like an item that had served its purpose and was quietly discarded. I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. I remembered the first night she told me she wanted to be a doctor. We were sitting on the floor of my old apartment, backs against the couch because we couldn't afford a dining table yet. She had spoken with fire in her eyes, hands shaking with excitement. I told her I believed in her before she even finished the sentence. I meant it. Belief was easy back then. I believed when I took extra shifts and came home at midnight smelling like grease and sweat. I believed when I postponed my own plans, my own ideas, telling myself there would be time later. I believed when I watched her study while I balanced bills that never seemed to shrink. I believed when she cried from exhaustion and I told her it would all be worth it. I didn't realize that worth it had an expiration date. At the restaurant, she leaned toward me finally, her voice low so only I could hear. I didn't want to do this publicly, she said. But it felt like the right time. The right time. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't trust myself to speak. What I wanted to say was ugly. I wanted to say, I paid for your right time. I wanted to say, you don't get to outgrow me like I was a mistake. But instead I smiled. A thin, polite smile I had perfected over years of swallowing disappointment. Congratulations, I said quietly. She hesitated for half a second. Maybe guilt. Maybe relief. Then she turned away. The rest of the night blurred. I remember standing outside the restaurant afterward, the city lights too bright, the traffic too loud. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. I already knew what it would be. Messages asking if I was okay, words that couldn't fix anything. I walked. No destination. Just movement. Every step felt like gravity had increased. Like the ground was trying to claim me. I replayed the scene again and again, searching for the moment where I could have changed the outcome. The fight I should have picked. the boundary I should have set, the version of myself who should have mattered more. But all I saw was a pattern. I had made myself useful instead of irreplaceable. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a partner and became a resource. By the time I reached my apartment, my chest ached, not sharply, but deeply, like a bruise pressed too many times. I unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet. Her shoes were still by the wall. A mug she liked sat in the sink, evidence of a life that had already moved on without me. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let my shoulders drop. That's when the thought hit me, uninvited and cruel. If I was no longer needed, was I ever loved? I lay back and stared at the ceiling, listening to my own breathing. Slow, uneven. The kind of breathing you do when you're trying not to fall apart. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. One message stood out, not new, but unread. Sent weeks ago. From Grandma. I hadn't opened it because I told myself I was too busy. Because I assumed there would be time later. I stared at her name on the screen, my throat tightening. She always said people reveal themselves when they think you have nothing left to offer. At the restaurant, I had become invisible the moment my usefulness expired. I didn't open the message yet. I wasn't ready to hear her voice in my head. Not tonight. Instead, I set the phone face down and closed my eyes. I told myself this was just heartbreak, that I'd survive it like everything else. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't just the day she walked away. It was the day I realized I had been walking away from myself for years, and I had no idea how to get back. The morning after she left me in front of everyone, I woke up to a silence that felt louder than the restaurant ever was. No alarm. No movement beside me. No soft sounds of her getting ready, humming off-key while scrolling through her phone. Just the hum of the ceiling fan and the weight in my chest reminding me I was still here, and she wasn't. For a few seconds, I lay there pretending nothing had changed. I let myself believe that if I didn't move, the world might reset. That she might walk back in, annoyed that I'd slept through her alarm, asking if I'd seen her stethoscope. Then reality crept in. Her side of the bed was cold. I sat up slowly, like my body was afraid of what I'd see once I was fully awake. The apartment looked the same, but it felt wrong, like a set after the actors had gone home. Too much space. Too much quiet. I reached for my phone. 3 missed calls. 2 texts from friends. 1 email notification that made my stomach drop before I even opened it. Final notice. I exhaled through my nose, a humorless laugh slipping out. Of course. Of all days. I opened the email. Rent overdue. Payment required immediately. Legal language dressed up to sound polite while threatening to dismantle what little stability I had left. I checked my bank balance next. The numbers stared back at me, small and embarrassed. I did the math automatically. Utilities. Groceries. Loan payments. Her tuition. The last one hit me harder than I expected. I'd never thought of it as her tuition. Not really. In my head, it was our future. An investment. A bridge to something better. That's what I told myself every time I transferred money I didn't have, every time I pushed my own plans aside. I swung my legs off the bed and stood there longer than necessary, steadying myself. This is what no one warns you about. Heartbreak doesn't come alone. It brings invoices. I made coffee I didn't want and drank it anyway, standing by the window. Outside, the city was already moving. Men in pressed shirts, women on phones, people with somewhere to be. I watched them like an outsider, like I'd missed an unspoken meeting where everyone else figured life out. I thought about the first job I turned down. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. Offered growth. Stability. I remembered holding the offer letter, excitement buzzing in my hands, before folding it carefully and sliding it into a drawer. I need flexibility right now, I'd told the recruiter. What I meant was, she needs me available. I remembered the night I sold my motorcycle. The one thing I'd bought just for myself. I told myself I didn't ride it much anyway. That it was a responsible decision. She kissed my cheek and said she was proud of me. I mistook gratitude for love. The memories came in pieces as I moved through the apartment. The cheap furniture we'd bought together. The chipped plates. The couch where I'd slept sitting up when she needed space to study. Every object felt like evidence. I wasn't just grieving her. I was auditing my life. Around noon, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. "Man," my friend Arjun said carefully, "you alive?" "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded normal, which surprised me. "You want company?" I looked around the apartment. At the silence. At the bills open on my phone. "Not today." There was a pause. "Okay," he said. "But listen, don't disappear." After the call ended, his words lingered. Don't disappear. I wondered when I had started doing exactly that. In the afternoon, I sat down with a notebook I hadn't opened in years. Inside were old ideas. Half-written plans. Dreams I'd abandoned so quietly I almost convinced myself they were never important. I flipped through the pages slowly. Every idea ended the same way. Later. Later never came. By evening, the weight in my chest had shifted. It wasn't sharp anymore, it was heavy. Settled. Like something permanent had moved in. That's when my mother called. I almost didn't answer. But something in me was tired of running. "I heard," she said gently after I said hello. I closed my eyes. "I'm fine." She didn't argue. "You gave a lot," she said instead. The words cracked something open. "I thought that's what you're supposed to do," I said quietly. "For the right person," she replied. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone. For the first time since last night, anger surfaced, not at her, but at myself. I had confused sacrifice with love. I had believed that if I gave enough, stayed long enough, endured quietly enough, I'd earn permanence. But love isn't something you prove by erasing yourself. Later that night, as I lay back on the bed, my phone buzzed again. A message from her. "I hope you understand why this happened." I stared at the screen. Understanding had never protected me before. I didn't reply. Instead, my eyes drifted to the unopened message from Grandma again. Weeks old. Waiting. She always told me that a man who gives up his direction for love eventually loses both. At the time, I thought she was being dramatic. Now, lying in the quiet of an apartment I could barely afford, staring at a future that felt stripped bare, I wondered if she'd seen this coming long before I did. I didn't open her message yet. But for the first time, I wanted to. Because somewhere between everything I gave and everything I lost, I realized something terrifying. If I didn't figure out who I was without her, there would be nothing left to save. By the third day, the pain stopped feeling dramatic and started feeling instructional. It wasn't the kind of heartbreak movies warn you about, the crying in the rain kind. It was quieter. More dangerous. The kind that sits beside you while you brush your teeth and asks questions you've been avoiding for years. Who were you before you started shrinking? I stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than necessary, studying my own face like it belonged to a stranger. Same eyes. Same scar on my chin from a bike accident when I was 17. But something was missing. Direction. I looked tired, but not just from lack of sleep. I looked like someone who had been waiting for permission. I went to work because routine was the only thing holding me together. The commute felt longer than usual. Every billboard promising success or happiness felt like it was mocking me personally. At the office, I moved through the day on autopilot. Emails answered. Tasks completed. Conversations nodded through. No one mentioned the breakup, and I was grateful for that. Sympathy would have cracked me open. Around lunch, I caught myself staring at a blank document on my computer screen. It wasn't work-related. I didn't even remember opening it. At the top of the page, I typed a title without realizing it. Things I wanted before I got sensible. I stared at the words, my chest tightening. Before I got sensible. That's what I'd called it. Not before I gave up. Not before I got scared. Sensible. I minimized the document quickly, like I'd been caught doing something wrong. That's when it hit me. I had spent so long being the responsible one, the supportive one, the steady one, that I had quietly erased the part of me that wanted more. And worse, I'd convinced myself that was maturity. On the way home, I took a different route without thinking. My feet led me past an old building with a faded sign. The windows were dusty now, but I remembered when they were always lit late into the night. A co-working space. Years ago, I used to come here after my day job. I'd sit with people who talked about ideas instead of survival. We'd argue about business models, about risk, about what kind of lives we wanted. I stopped coming when things got serious. When love demanded consistency. When sacrifice became my personality. I stood outside for a moment, hands in my pockets, watching someone else push open the door and step into the life I'd abandoned. I didn't follow. Fear is efficient like that. At home, I dug out the old notebook again. The one filled with half-finished plans and ambitious handwriting that looked nothing like mine does now. Page after page, I saw the same man trying to speak. A man who wanted autonomy. A man who believed time was expandable. A man who thought love would add to his life, not replace it. I closed the notebook and leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. Was I naive back then? Or was I just honest? My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It's Raghav. She said we should clear the air. No hard feelings. My stomach tightened. Clear the air. As if the problem was oxygen. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that, too. What was I supposed to say to the man who represented everything I thought I wasn't? I locked my phone and set it down. This wasn't about him. It was about the version of me that believed love required permission slips and financial comparisons. That night, I finally opened Grandma's message. Not the letter. Just the voice note she'd sent before. Her voice filled the room, steady, familiar, unhurried. You sound tired, she said. Not sick. Not sad. Tired of pretending. My throat tightened. She continued, I don't know what you're going through, but I know this. You don't lose yourself overnight. You trade pieces of yourself slowly, until one day you wake up and can't remember what you were protecting in the first place. I closed my eyes. She always spoke like she was giving advice to a future version of me. I love that you're loyal, she said. But loyalty without direction turns into servitude. And love that asks you to disappear isn't love, it's convenience. The message ended. I sat there long after, replaying her words. Loyalty without direction. That was it. I had been loyal to her dreams because I wasn't brave enough to defend my own. The realization didn't feel empowering. It felt humiliating. Because it meant this wasn't just something that happened to me. I had participated. Later that night, I opened the blank document again. This time, I didn't close it. I started listing things. Not goals, not plans. Just truths. I wrote, I want work that doesn't make me feel invisible. I want love that doesn't require shrinking. I want to stop asking permission to want more. Each sentence felt like pulling a thorn out slowly. Painful, but relieving. When I finished, I noticed something strange. I wasn't thinking about her. For the first time since the restaurant, my thoughts weren't orbiting around what she did, who she chose, or how easily she walked away. They were turning inward. Toward responsibility. Toward choice. That scared me more than heartbreak ever had. Because heartbreak lets you stay a victim. Choice demands accountability. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. Another message from her. I never meant to hurt you. I hope someday you see that. I stared at it, then set the phone down. Meaning had never changed outcomes. Action did. As I turned off the light, one question followed me into the dark. If I had built my entire identity around being needed, who would I become once I stopped begging to matter? I didn't have the answer yet. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of asking. I waited until the apartment was completely quiet before I opened Grandma's letter. Not just quiet in the way a place gets at night, but the kind of quiet that settles after you've exhausted every distraction. No phone in my hand. No television humming in the background. Just me, the dim yellow light of a single lamp, and an envelope that felt heavier than paper should. I had carried it around for weeks. Slid it from table to drawer, drawer to backpack, backpack to table again. Telling myself I'd read it when things slowed down. Things never slow down on their own. I sat on the edge of the bed and ran my thumb along the crease of the envelope. Her handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, patient, confident. The kind of handwriting that didn't rush because it didn't doubt it would be heard. For a moment I was afraid. Afraid she'd say something comforting. Afraid she'd be right. I opened it. The paper crackled softly, the sound cutting through the room. I unfolded the pages carefully, as if I could tear the words themselves if I moved too fast. My dear boy. That's how she always started. Not dear grandson. Not my name. Just my dear boy, like she was speaking to the part of me that existed before I learned how to perform adulthood. If you're reading this, it means I wasn't there to say these things out loud. I wish I were. But I've learned that some truths land better when they arrive quietly. I swallowed. She had been sick when she wrote this. I knew that now. She never told me how bad it was. She didn't believe in burdening people with things they couldn't fix. I've watched you love people the way men are taught to love, by enduring, by providing, by staying silent when something costs you more than it should. My chest tightened. There is honor in that, she wrote. But there is danger too. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, eyes locked on the page. You confuse loyalty with self-erasure. You think being strong means being useful. And one day, if you're not careful, you'll wake up next to a life that looks impressive from the outside but feels hollow when you're alone with it. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She hadn't just known. She had been watching it happen. I don't blame the people you love, she continued. Most people will accept the version of you that asks for the least. That doesn't make them evil. It makes them human. That line stayed with me. Not evil. Just human. It stripped the story of villains and left me face to face with something harder, responsibility. But I want you to understand this clearly, she wrote. A man who abandons his direction to keep someone else comfortable will eventually be resented by both. I felt that sentence settle somewhere deep, like a truth that didn't need defending. You deserve a life where love adds weight, not gravity. Where your dreams are not treated like phases to grow out of. The words blurred for a moment. I blinked hard and kept reading. If someone only values you for what you provide, they will disappear the moment your usefulness ends. That is not a tragedy. That is information. Information. Not failure. Not humiliation. Information. I leaned back, staring at the wall as her words echoed in my head. The restaurant scene replayed itself. How easily she had spoken, how natural it had seemed for her to move on. Grandma had seen it coming from miles away. I went back to the letter. I hope by the time you read this, you are tired of begging to be chosen. I hope you are curious again. Angry even. Anger can be useful when it points you back to yourself. I almost laughed. She always did like anger when it was honest. You are not behind, she wrote. You are early to a truth most men learn too late, that peace comes from alignment, not approval. Alignment? I whispered the word out loud, testing how it sounded in my mouth. If you take nothing else from this letter, she concluded, take this. Do not build your life around being needed. Build it around being whole. The right people will recognize the difference. The letter ended simply. I love you. Always have. I always will. I lowered the pages slowly, my hands trembling, not from grief, but from recognition. I felt exposed. And strangely steady. For years, I had been waiting for someone to tell me I had done enough. That my sacrifices had been sufficient to earn permanence. Grandma hadn't given me permission. She'd given me a mirror. I sat there for a long time, letting the words rearrange things inside me. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like furniture being moved in the dark. This wasn't a speech about revenge or rising above someone who hurt me. It was an invitation to stop negotiating with my own worth. My phone buzzed on the bed beside me. A message from her. Can we talk? I don't like how things ended. I looked at the screen, then at the letter in my hands. For the first time, the timing didn't feel urgent. I wasn't angry. I wasn't tempted. I was clear. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I finally understood that not every conversation deserves access to the new version of you. I folded Grandma's letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I set it on my desk instead of hiding it away. A reminder. That night, I slept deeper than I had in weeks. No dreams. No replays. Just rest. In the morning, I woke up with a strange sensation in my chest. Not hope. Not excitement. Orientation. Like a compass had finally stopped spinning. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet. But I knew one thing with certainty. I was done shrinking to fit into someone else's future. And whatever came next, it would be built facing forward. The first thing I noticed after reading Grandma's letter wasn't confidence. It was silence. Not the empty kind that haunted the apartment after she left, but a quieter, steadier absence. Like a noise I hadn't realized was constant had finally been turned off. I didn't wake up transformed. I didn't suddenly feel powerful or healed. What I felt was resolved. And resolution, I was learning, didn't announce itself loudly. It showed up in small, almost forgettable decisions. Like not checking my phone the moment I woke up. Like eating breakfast without rushing. Like realizing I didn't need to rehearse conversations that might never happen. That morning, I showered and stood under the water longer than usual, letting it run over my shoulders as if it could rinse off the version of me that had spent years trying to earn permanence. I dressed simply. Clean shirt. A watch. No performance. On my way out, I hesitated by the door and looked back at the apartment. I'd been treating it like a waiting room. Somewhere along the way, I decided it was time to stop waiting. At work, something felt different, not externally, but internally. The same emails. The same deadlines. The same polite indifference. But for the first time, I wasn't measuring myself against an invisible standard I thought I had to meet. I finished my tasks quickly. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my calendar and blocked 2 hours. No meeting title. No justification. Just space. During that time, I pulled out my notebook, the old one, and opened to a fresh page. Instead of plans or dreams, I wrote one sentence at the top. What am I avoiding because it might change things? The answer came faster than I expected. I was avoiding risk because risk meant I could fail on my own terms instead of blaming circumstance or sacrifice. I spent the rest of those 2 hours researching an opportunity I'd ignored for months. A role that aligned with skills I'd buried. It wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't safe. But it was mine. My phone buzzed halfway through. Her name. I stared at it until the screen went dark. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. At lunch, Arjun stopped by my desk. "You look different," he said, squinting like he was trying to figure out what changed. "Tired?" "No," I said after a moment. "Lighter." He raised an eyebrow. "That's dangerous," he said. "Means you're about to do something." I smiled despite myself. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." That evening, I went home and made a decision I'd been delaying out of fear disguised as nostalgia. I opened my phone and scrolled through old photos. Trips we'd taken. Meals we couldn't afford at the time. Her laughing at something I'd said, eyes soft, unburdened. I felt the pull. Memory is persuasive. But I reminded myself of something Grandma wrote. If someone only values you for what you provide, they will disappear the moment your usefulness ends. I didn't delete the photos in a rush. I deleted them carefully. One by one. Not to erase the past, but to stop living inside it. When I finished, my phone felt quieter. Cleaner. Later, I drafted an email for the opportunity I'd researched. My finger hovered over the send button longer than I'd like to admit. This was the moment I usually backed out. I thought about how often I'd chosen comfort over alignment. Then I pressed send. The sound was soft. Almost anticlimactic. But something inside me shifted. That night, she called. I let it ring. Not because I was strong, but because I was done negotiating. When the call stopped, a message followed. "I just want to explain. I owe you that." I stared at the words. For years, I had chased explanations like they were currency. Like understanding would somehow reimburse the cost. But explanations don't return time. They don't rebuild identity. They don't make you whole. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Finally I wrote, "I'm taking some space. I wish you well." I sent it before doubt could catch up. The silence afterward wasn't heavy. It was earned. I slept deeply that night. No dreams. No rehearsals. Just rest. In the morning I checked my email. A response. Not an offer. Not a rejection. An invitation to talk. My heart sped up, not from fear, but anticipation. I closed my laptop and sat there for a moment, hands resting on my knees. This wasn't victory. It was direction. And direction, I was learning, was more powerful than approval. As I stood up, my phone buzzed again. Another message from her. I didn't open it. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay closed. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was choosing. The knock on my apartment door that evening was sharp, unexpected, like a bell signaling trouble. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it cautiously. She stood there. Same posture. Same poised expression. Same look in her eyes that once made me feel like I could do anything. But now I saw the subtle cracks. The corners of her confidence weren't quite as sharp. The perfection she carried like armor now looked fragile. "Can we talk?" she said. I stepped back. The apartment felt suddenly smaller. "About what?" I asked. Not angrily. Not warmly. Neutral. Curious in a way I hadn't felt in years. She hesitated. She looked away. I wanted to explain. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I held up my hand. "Stop," I said. Not to shut her down. To stop myself from reacting the way I would have before. To stop old patterns from rising. She blinked, surprised. "I'm listening," I added quietly. That's when the real test began. Not her words. Not her apologies. Not the guilt she tried to manufacture. It was me. Could I stay steady without shrinking? Could I hold the space without bending toward old habits? I let her speak. She talked about timing, choices, ambition, and feelings she thought I'd understand. Her words used to cut me open like a surgeon with precision. Now they landed softly, mere facts, not verdicts. And I listened. Really listened. Not waiting to rebut. Not hoping for remorse. Not begging for recognition. When she paused, I spoke. "I know why you did it," I said. "I can even understand it. But that doesn't change that I've been learning something about myself these past weeks." She tilted her head. Waiting. "I'm done shrinking," I continued. "I'm done letting my life be measured by how useful I am to someone else. I can't undo the past, and I'm not asking you to explain it away. That chapter is over for me." Her eyes widened slightly. "Raghav," she started. "Don't," I said gently. "No need to justify or plead. I'm not here for closure from you. I'm here to be present with myself." The silence that followed was thick, not uncomfortable but charged. I realized she had never seen me like this before. Not truly. Not whole. Not someone who could listen, acknowledge, and still walk forward untouched. I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. "You've changed," she said finally. "Yes," I said. "And I'm not done." I watched her weigh her words carefully. She wanted to steer the conversation, to reclaim a space she believed she still had. But I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I simply existed in the space I had reclaimed for myself. When she left, there was no dramatic slam. No shouting. No breakdown. Just the quiet finality of someone who has tested themselves and passed. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting it absorb the tension I had carried for so long. Later, I sat at my desk, notebook open. I wrote down everything that had happened. Not as a confession. Not as a plan. Not as a complaint. Just the facts and the emotions that remained mine. I realized the first confrontation wasn't with her. It was with every version of myself that had been complicit in my own invisibility. And for the first time, I felt the power of choice again. To act. To prioritize myself. To pursue what I wanted without apology. The apartment no longer felt small. The night stretched around me like permission. For the first time, I understood something Grandma had written weeks ago. Anger can be useful when it points you back to yourself. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt aligned. And that alignment was stronger than any argument, any apology, any regret. Before sleep, I drafted a rough plan for the next steps. Career moves, personal goals, even small routines that had been neglected. Each line of ink felt like a brick in a new foundation. Tomorrow, I would wake up not chasing approval. Not hiding behind usefulness. I would wake up ready to be fully present in the life I chose for myself. And that was the first real victory. The morning was unremarkable. The city moved on, as it always did, indifferent to personal revolutions. But I felt a shift beneath the skin, a steady pulse of control I hadn't known I could feel. I walked to work differently. Not faster, not slower, but with a quiet assurance in my posture, as if my spine remembered the man I had once ignored. At the office, I made small changes first. Answering emails with clarity, prioritizing tasks that mattered to me, and politely saying no to the ones that didn't. Each refusal was a brick in the wall I was building, not against anyone, but around my own boundaries. Then came the real test. Her name appeared on my phone. Finn. I didn't hesitate this time. I read the message. Another apology. Another attempt to justify. Another subtle pull toward the old life. I put the phone down. Not ignoring her. Not avoiding responsibility. Choosing myself. The rest of the morning passed in focused work. The afternoon brought a meeting I'd been dreading. Raghav, the rich surgeon she had left me for, was in the same professional conference I was attending. The same man who had reminded me of everything I had sacrificed. The same man who had been everything I thought I needed to fear. I felt a tightness in my chest, but nothing more. No envy. No self-doubt. Just recognition. When he approached, I shook his hand firmly. Direct eye contact. No hesitation. Dr. Malhotra, he said, surprised by my calm. Yes, I replied. Let's talk professionally. Not casually, not cordially, but professionally. Boundaries clear. The conversation was brief, efficient, productive. We discussed the project without emotion, without resentment. I realized in that moment that the battle wasn't with him at all. It had never been. It was with myself. Afterward, I stepped outside the conference room. The sunlight hit my face, warm but not overwhelming. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. For years, I had defined myself through what others needed from me. Today, I define myself by what I chose for me. The rest of the day became a series of small victories. Accepting an opportunity one had been hesitant to pursue, speaking up in a way I had always feared, and leaving work on time instead of staying late for approval. That evening, I returned home and sat in my apartment. The city lights blinked against the dark. The apartment was quiet but felt alive in a new way. My life wasn't perfect. The wounds of heartbreak remained. The past still lingered. But I had taken back control. I opened my notebook and wrote. Today, I chose myself. Today, I reclaimed direction. Today, I acted instead of reacted. I paused, pen in hand, feeling the weight and the relief of those words. Each letter felt like a declaration. Later, my phone buzzed again. Her name appeared. I glanced at it once and then put it aside. No impulse to respond. No need to justify. No emotional negotiation. Control, I realized, wasn't silence or avoidance. It was presence. Awareness. The power to act intentionally rather than be pulled by old patterns. That night, I prepared for the first time in years with intention. Not for anyone else. Not for her. Not for approval. Just for me. I chose the clothes I liked. I cooked the meal I wanted. I listened to music that resonated, not what I thought would impress. Sitting down to eat, I felt a clarity I hadn't known since childhood. I wasn't happy because someone had chosen me or because circumstances aligned. I was happy because I was choosing to be fully present in my own life. Before bed, I reflected on the journey from the restaurant, to the apartment, to Grandma's letter, to my first real choices. Each step had been small, but cumulative. Each moment of clarity built on the last. I realized then that this was the real climax. Not the confrontations, not the heartbreak, not the apologies. It was the reclaiming of myself. I went to sleep that night with a sense of completion, not from resolution of external conflicts, but from mastery over my own reactions, emotions, and decisions. A profound quiet filled me, not absence, but presence. Tomorrow I would wake up again. And again. Not to chase anyone or anything external, but to continue being the man I had chosen to become. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, gentle but insistent. I woke up without dread, without expectation, without the weight of being measured by someone else's standards. Just the quiet clarity that comes when you've done the hard work of finding yourself again. I moved through the apartment deliberately, taking small actions that felt significant. Coffee brewed while I opened my notebook, reviewing the goals, reflections, and small victories of the past week. Each line of ink reminded me that growth isn't a moment, it's a series of choices, each one building upon the last. I dressed for myself. I didn't second-guess colors or impressions. I chose comfort, style, and confidence in equal measure, a reflection of the alignment I was cultivating inside. Breakfast was simple. Toast, eggs, music I genuinely loved, not what someone else would have approved of. Every bite was an affirmation that my life was mine to design and inhabit fully. At work, the day felt like a new rhythm. Tasks were still demanding. Challenges still arose. But for the first time, I responded with intention, not reaction. Emails were sent decisively. Meetings were attended with focus, not obligation. And when the new opportunity one had applied for was confirmed, it wasn't a validation from someone else. It was a reward for choosing myself, for acting despite fear, for being present. Returning home, I walked through the city streets differently. Not faster, not slower, just aware. Watching people moving in their routines, I noticed moments I had ignored before. A child laughing without restraint, an elderly couple holding hands, a street musician lost in their craft. Life moved on, indifferent but beautiful. And I realized I was a participant, not a spectator. Her name came to mind briefly. I felt no pull, no anger, no need to prove anything. I thought about the messages, the calls, the moments she had taken. And I let them go. Not with dramatic closure, but with quiet acknowledgement. They belonged to the past, as I belonged to my present. Grandma's letter lay on my desk, still folded neatly in its envelope. I touched it lightly. Her words had guided me here, but they didn't define me anymore. They were a compass, and now I was moving forward on my own bearings. That evening, I opened the notebook and wrote freely. No structure, no plan, just honest reflection. I am enough. I am choosing direction. I am alive in my own life. Each phrase was a quiet victory, a testament to months of struggle, heartbreak, and revelation. The apartment was filled with a comfortable quiet. Not loneliness, not emptiness, but presence. I could sit and simply be without guilt or longing. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine the future, not in terms of someone else's expectations, but in the possibilities I could create. Career, relationships, friendships, personal growth, all filtered through the lens of alignment and intentionality. I realized something profound. Happiness isn't found in being chosen. It isn't found in validation or the absence of pain. It is found in the deliberate act of being present with yourself, in making decisions that honor who you are rather than who others want you to be. I didn't need a grand gesture. I didn't need closure from anyone else. I had arrived at a quiet, potent truth. Becoming whole is the reward, and it can only come from within. As the night deepened, I reflected on the journey. From the restaurant that shattered my assumptions, to the apartment that forced reflection, to Grandma's letter that reframed my understanding of loyalty, sacrifice, and self-worth, to the first choices that aligned with my values, and finally to the moments of controlled confrontation. The path had been jagged, uncomfortable, but profoundly real. I prepared for bed, feeling a sense of completion. Not because the world had changed. Not because pain had vanished. But because I had changed. I had reclaimed agency. I had learned that my worth was intrinsic, not measured by the whims or choices of others. Lying down, I felt a deep, steady peace. The tension that had coiled in my chest for years had softened. I closed my eyes and breathed, fully present, fully accountable, fully alive. I had become the man I forgot to be. Whole, resilient, and unshakable. And tomorrow, I would continue to choose myself, one deliberate step at a time.